Stephen Welch. Sorry, Zoom message there. Chair of the Capital Program Committee. I'd like to confirm access. Richard Hussey.
Present.
Christy Kickham.
Here.
Jill.
Here.
Myself. Rick.
Here.
Libby.
Here.
Tucker. We see you.
Here.
Brian.
In attendance.
Excellent. And we have an administration, Nantucket. Is that Greg?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's me. It's Craig. I'll change that.
Okay. And we'll welcome Christy Ferrantella. Hi, Christy.
Hi.
Great. So let's see, we've got all that covered, and this open meeting of the Capital Program Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Meeting is via Zoom with video and audio recording. There's a good chance will be broadcast later on the town's YouTube channel. Note that anything presented on Zoom may be captured and broadcast. The town's website identifies how the public may join. With no member of the public present, this meeting will not feature public comment. Unless otherwise noted, materials discussed at the meeting or provided for the meeting are available on the town's website. During the meeting, I'll introduce agenda topics and speakers. Please remember to mute your Zoom audio until your name is called. I hear somebody not muted somewhere. Let's direct comments and questions through the chair to avoid crosstalk and make things a little bit easier for Terry taking minutes. And votes will be conducted, votes will be, if any, will be conducted via roll call. I would note we do have a member of the public, I believe Jason Graziata. Jason.
Good morning.
Good morning. Are you here in an official capacity?
I'm here in my role as the Nantucket Current. Yep. So member of the press.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to identify we've got somebody, if you were going to speak on a matter as a member of the public. Thank you.
Okay.
With that said, I'd like to get a call. I'll call the meeting of Capital Program Committee to order. It's Thursday, September 16th, just after 10 a.m. If I could get a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Richard, on your motion?
Aye.
Great. Let's see, Christy Kickham,
Yeah. Aye.
Jill,
Hi.
Christy Ferrantella,
Here.
and I'm in favor too. Great. So we have, I think we've got an approval of minutes. Rick, was that the 12th?
Yep.
Great.
Yes.
Can I get a motion on the minutes of the 12th unless anyone has changes?
So moved.
Okay, Jill, on your motion? Oh, was it Christy?
It was Christy, but I.
Okay, great. Christy, on your motion?
Aye. Richard?
Aye.
Christy Kickham.
Aye.
All right, excellent. This morning, we're going to discuss the town admin's FY23 capital requests and a little bit of discussion on out years as Libby gears up with a little bit of coffee.
And that was to Excedrin migraine, not because of you all.
Oh. Well, that's good to know. Why don't we go ahead and give you the floor? Rick, if you could pull up the spreadsheet, that'd be great.
So as Rick is pulling that up, I think between myself, Greg, and Brian, we will all be kind of taking turns on some of these items. So beginning with the two Fairgrounds Municipal Office Building, recently the Select Board has pretty much, I guess, given the go-ahead to start planning for a municipal office building at the two Fairgrounds site. They've had a number of, this has been a discussion, you know, as you all know, going back years. Possibly most recently in 2010, we had a, and actually probably more recently than that. But going back to 2010, we started looking at additional space for town offices, and we had a number of scenarios that we were looking at down here at 16 Broad. And the FinCom at the time and kind of the Select Board said, we want to know a better idea of overall facilities master planning before we launch into something like that. So that took several years. And I think, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, around 2014, we engaged a group called LLB to give us a feasibility study for a municipal office building at the two Fairgrounds site. And that is most recently where it has stood. And not too much has happened since then with the planning other than we are bursting at the seams with municipal offices. We have had to take over conference rooms for office space. As you know, we have temporarily moved some departments to the 131 Pleasant Street site. And we're constantly determining where we can move people to. And so at this point, the estimated cost, and it's just basically based on an escalation of estimated costs from 2014, which was around, I think, between 30 and 40 million. And knowing what we know today, that, you know, construction costs have become volatile and more than we've budgeted for in some instances. So we're projecting a $50 million project cost, obviously subject to change. And in order to get the planning going, we need to engage an architect and an owner's project manager. And those costs typically comprise approximately 10% of the estimated cost. And we've added a little bit more into that for this project. Brian, Rick, or Greg, do you guys want to add anything?
But I just want to add that all the documents you were talking about, LLB and all the studies are on the town's website under either projects and developments or also linked under the DPW page under facilities, if anybody wants to go and look at all those documents.
I should say that the effort here is intended to put almost all of the municipal offices in one location. And there obviously are a number of benefits to that, ranging from centralized maintenance of one building rather than many or multiple, and also the general staff interaction that generates a lot of good discussion and ideas and planning when they're all together in one place. So just going kind of by memory here, the only offices that would not be in a building like this would be police and fire. Obviously, they'll remain where they are. Public Works is a whole separate issue, and there's planning underway for a new Public Works facility, but it's possible that there would be an administrative office for the director at this building. The sewer department would remain where it is, and I think most other offices would be in this building, except for the other issue with this building is that where we are now at 16 Broad, ultimately 16 Broad would be reconfigured and the town clerk would stay here, the registry of deeds, the court offices would have some potential for expansion. The sheriff would possibly come over to 16 Broad, and the South Water Street building where he is now, which houses the sheriff's department as well as the NRTA office. That potentially could be repurposed into some kind of visitor center with additional bathrooms is what we've talked about, possibly some community use. And the visitor services building could either be removed or expanded again, possibly for more bathrooms and more visitor space. The 3 Chestnut building, the so-called old police station, potentially would be removed and either something else built in its place, which possibly could connect between the old police station and the visitor center, some kind of connection there, unknown as to what it is. It's all very much under discussion now. In the meantime, 3 East Chestnut is likely to get repurposed a little bit for some offices that need additional space that are kind of jammed in their quarters right now. So I just wanted to make note of those things. So there are going to be additional funds needed for the reconfiguration of this block.
Richard?
What's the concept? Are you going to move everyone out and then gut the building, rebuild it, and then move everyone back in? Or will you build around offices that are there?
At 16 Broad or?
No, I'm sorry. I'm talking about 2 Fairgrounds.
2 Fairgrounds, I think that building would be demolished, and those people would have to go somewhere else for the time being, possibly in trailers to the rear of the property. I mean, we don't even have we have no sketches, no drawings, no nothing like that. But in answer to that basic question, the building would be demolished and those people would be housed elsewhere temporarily while the new building is being built, which most likely would be closer to the road, probably closer to the fairgrounds side with parking in the back.
Thanks, Richard. Christy Kickham?
Libby, curious if they would consider some sort of construction similar to what Stop and Shop did, where they built while the old one was still standing, maybe built towards the back of the property. I know that there's been some departments over the last few years that have looked into getting some storage space for vehicles. I know they have a big garage there. I didn't know if that, instead of demolishing it, maybe keeping a portion of that. Not sure how that would fit into the site plan, you know, but just thinking about us looking at storage options for vehicles and how that would possibly, if it could fit in.
The building is not in terrific condition. And I think ultimately the idea would be that in order to have a sufficiently sized municipal office building, all of that building that's existing right now needs to go. And the parking lot probably would have some reconfiguration as well. Whether or not any components of the building could be repurposed for keeping things undercover remains to be seen. That is something we could certainly investigate.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I don't think the need has gone away at all for the public safety outbuilding that we have talked about in the past, which
Yeah.
remains in out years of the capital plan.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Any other questions or comments at this point? Jill?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you've looked into selling some pieces of these properties, as, you know, if you're not going to use maybe the area where the sheriff is, or, you know, if there's any discussion about that for, you know, raising money to do the project a little bit.
That has come up, and it comes up quite often at every non-voting taxpayer meeting that I've attended. There's always a recommendation to just sell the 16 Broad Street piece and or 20 South Water. And I think the town administration recommendation on that would be not to do that. We would never be able to replace this property anywhere downtown. And I think it's important that there be some kind of a municipal presence downtown. That's not to say that it's out of the question. Certainly, that's just me saying that. The policymakers could turn that around if they wished. But at this point, the thinking is that there would be some offices that would remain in town, and there's really nowhere else for them to go in town. Oh, I wanted to mention too, the finance department would of course be part of the project out of town, and the thinking there is that that building would be removed and parking lot could be expanded.
Thank you. So Libby, I just got one, actually I have two questions. One is with the seasonal employee housing dormitory that's been around since 18 as a fiscal year 19 original request that has not been able to get advanced for various reasons. Where does that, can that fit into the concept development on the timeline that you all are looking at or proposing, so that perhaps if there was a better way to put those pieces of the puzzle together on that particular property and the adjacent property, or is the seasonal housing more driven by the road layout and plans that are already in place?
I think we're going to give you a little bit of an update when we get to the seasonal employee housing item for fiscal 23. Right now, we have funds for a feasibility study and site design for property along Waite Drive, you know, behind the two Fairgrounds building. And so that is progressing. Yes, it has been slow, but it is progressing. And I'm not sure if it can be coordinated with the construction of an office building there. I guess possibly, but that would mean we would be delaying the dorm construction.
Okay, and just to clarify, my question is more along the lines of site planning as opposed to actual construction.
Oh, I see. Well, yes, I think we'll definitely be taking both of these things into consideration as we are planning for the site design, for sure, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then seriousness of the overall cost aside for the moment, can you just put to rest the rumor that there's an Olympic-sized pool going in the basement of 2 Fairgrounds? I'm teasing you.
There's no Olympic pool.
I seem to recall that that was talked about at the police station
Yes, that,
as a rumor.
Carol.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts or questions at this time on this particular request?
but by the way, no pool, but the idea of underground parking has come up. And, you know, I'm sure that's something we will look at, but the cost of that is significant.
Mhm.
And while it would be nice to have parking that's not taking up space above ground, the cost of underground parking could be prohibitive.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Jill, you had a follow-up?
Just one more. So do you know about how many people and cars would be moving from your downtown location to Fairgrounds? Because that would be an expansion. Just a guess. It's okay. Let me just a guess.
No, I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by expansion.
Well, I mean, there are people at 2 Fairgrounds now. They're going to stay in that location. So whatever their existing cars are, and then now how many more people and cars are going to move out there from downtown?
Well, there would be more than just from downtown. There would be Town Building, 37 Washington, and 131 Pleasant, and possibly some others here and there. I'm not really sure of the number, but I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't even want to say a number because.
Okay.
Let me jump in there for a second. I don't think it's going to be significant. Thanks, Stephen. Because the majority of the traffic coming to 16 Broad Street will continue to come down, right? With RMV, courts, town clerk, registry of deeds, right? So moving HR and town admin, Tucker's office to 2 Fairgrounds Road, I don't think anybody would even notice. I mean, I wouldn't even do a study to know the difference, at least when it comes to 16 Broad and 2 Fairgrounds Road. 131 Pleasant, I get that would just be transferring from 1,000 feet over. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's moving people out of town. It seems like a good thing. I just wondered how much bigger the parking had to get. There's a good parking lot there. People use it. They're going there for the wave and things like that. So just was wondering about the site planning.
Okay, thanks, Jill. All right, so next up we have on the spreadsheet the townwide document management system.
All right, I think Greg's going to take this one. Greg?
Yep. Good morning, everybody. I've been tasked with the electronic document program since about FY18. And we kind of started a little bit before that, but in earnest in FY18. In FY19, we enlisted a state contract to make it easier and more cost effective to attempt our e-document program. And thanks to Mike Alvarez in the IT department, who really took the lead and has done yeoman's work on all of this. So we've, through SHI, we have contracts with Laserfiche, which is our software repository system. That is the technology we're using. General Code, who is an overall document management organizer through SHI, and Image Data, who actually takes the documents, scans them, separates them, logs them, and things like that. We did a pilot project starting in FY19 using the state contract. We looked specifically at public health, and we had quite a bit of hiccups, little bumps along the way. We have now finished with that pilot project, and everything is now on the, as far as public health is concerned, their documents are all now officially scanned and available online. You can just go right on the town's website. You don't even know you're going into a Laserfiche site if you're looking for a document in public health. We are, that price tag with just Laserfiche, General Code, and Image Data was about $130,000. Not to mention the startup cost that we put in order to purchase Laserfiche, the software, before the pilot project started. So we're already in about $250,000 worth. We were using SHI and the cost of per piece to do the public health scanning project, pilot project, to do a cost estimate for all the other departments. We already have an estimate of how many documents are by department, and of course, Plus being by far the largest. The estimate for Plus is well over $1 million in order to get everything done on site, no documents leaving the building, leaving the island. So where we are right now is we are starting with sewer, like our next step is with sewer, but we haven't really brought this forth to town administration yet. We may not want to use the state contract. It was not a seamless project. We had a lot of challenges from document scanning to the actual quality of the documents to invoicing. So we may want to bid this out. Soliciting quotes, just back of napkin, asking, giving numbers to organizations. We're getting estimates to just Dual Plus alone would be about 1.5. So right now we're asking for the 250 to continue the project. I think we've had that in the budget for out years for a couple of years. That allows us to at least get the smaller departments, if you can consider sewer smaller, but town administration and HR and others completed while we really figure out if we want to do an RFP and get another service in here instead of SHI on state contract. It was worthwhile trying. It saved the town money. It was definitely cheaper. It was easier procurement, but in the long run, my opinion, and I think our project team's opinion, it was not that great. So that's where we are. Our entire project, we had hoped to be completed by FY21, if people remember, but that never really is going to happen. But I think we are looking to hopefully have everything scanned, depending on how much it's going to cost, by FY24. Is that what we have, Libby? FY24, 25? And that's it. That's the update.
Thanks, Greg. Questions, comments for Greg at this time? Okay. Greg, I just have one. I think sewer and like building plus HDC, all those guys use typically 24 by 36 size documents. So
Yes.
obviously there's a big cost involved in that, both in terms of, getting the paperwork scanned just because it's unwieldy, but also the data.
Yeah.
I'm curious if your proposal, the RFP, will include like the hardware to be you accessing those types of things relatively easily, as opposed to just going and pulling a file and looking at a plan, or is that something you would foresee would be involved in the IT budget?
So our intent right now, at least as we were looking through and trying to create a scope, was to, for lack of better words, rent that equipment. One of the larger firms, Iron Mountain, would provide that equipment on site, like actually at 2FG, while we do the project. And then we would have to determine after the fact if we want to purchase our own equipment or continue with a contract. Equipment is kind of cost prohibitive, but we do want to get through the big hump of getting thousands of the HDC and building in very non-conforming documents done. Not only was the size an issue, but the quality of the paper. So we had to pull out various files, and we have paper that is so thin, very, very old, goes back obviously many years, that it takes a different type of scanner, apparently some different type of optical scanner to use it. So that's kind of, we're in that little gray area right now of what we're going to do. But yes, we have considered just at least renting on site.
Okay, thanks. And then tail end of that question in terms of like use after the fact. So going and being able to actually view the document without having it on a small tablet, zooming in and out. Is that a consideration for the front end with respect to the RFP, or is that something that would be an IT budget?
So no, this would be part of the entire project cost. And right now, the intent, I mean, hopefully, if you go to like a public health document, looking up a septic system or something, you can access it right through the town's website on a tablet, on your phone, or obviously on a computer screen. And hopefully it doesn't look any different. That was actually the trouble we had at the very, very beginning that Mike Alvarez had to work through, that the documents were not available on either a phone or a tablet or a different iOS system. Yeah, iOS. And that's been worked out. But yeah, a lot of things to consider. I just thought you scan the documents, get them in there, and people can get it, but it's not that simple.
Okay.
Especially when the technology we're using is we're using the OCR that will allow us to use keyword searches. And that was the big extra cost.
Very helpful feature. Christy Kickham.
Greg, is there any annual contractual costs, or once we get the hardware or software, is it just all us?
Nope, it's nope, there is an annual cost. There's licensing for the software for Laserfiche that is borne within the IT budget, going back to Stephen's question. And then we have licensing. So right now, I think we just increased it. If Brian's on the line, he may remember we just increased it to 25 licenses, which is not a lot because a lot of people aren't really using it. It's just for public health right now for the most part. But we're going to need more than that but we did increase the unlimited feature. So what was happening before, if Stephen was on looking at a document and walked away from his computer, that locked that license for a half an hour. And we paid to break that so that if we have 25 licenses, 25 people can be on at once and rotate. So yes, it's going to be an additional cost, and it's not crazy expensive, but it's an annual cost.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. I just want to take a moment to comment. Each of us is a member of the Capcom, and obviously finance and town administration and manager have access to a lot more data than the spreadsheet that's in front of us. And the reason I'm commenting is obviously we have a member of the press here, and they should be aware they're not typically around. They don't see these things, but it's a pretty in-depth document with a lot of information that we're able to preview before the meeting, as opposed to we're just reviewing a spreadsheet with some numbers on it. So I thought it might be helpful to point that out. And with that, I would say, I think we're up to seasonal employee housing.
All right, I think Brian is going to give us a bit of an update of where we are with our current seasonal employee housing project. The first step was to do some feasibility as to, particular siting, and also site design, and also refining the estimate of construction. The number here is based on the Nantucket Yacht Club style of dormitory housing, which, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say it was $3 million each.
Mhm.
And we're talking about probably 2 units like that. And so we've increased the cost because obviously municipal construction is going to be much more expensive than private with procurement requirements and all. So that number may need to be refined a bit. And we actually have talked a little bit about, should we move it out to 2024? But we really need to get on top of seasonal employee housing. So we really wanted to get the funds secured. Brian, you want to talk a little bit about where we are with the planning?
Sure. So we have an OPM, Vertex. We currently have a request for qualifications that are actually due back today for design firms to do, which would ideally would cite the location of potentially the two seasonal dormitories. It would provide, the request for qualifications would have the design firm also sketch out what the perimeter of the building would look like. We're going to do modulars, just like the Nantucket Yacht Club. Modular construction will actually hopefully keep the costs down, in so much as anything built off-site does not require prevailing wage. It only would require prevailing wage when we're on-site building it. So construction off-site would not subject us to the prevailing wage requirements. So we think there's an opportunity to save some costs there. Requests for qualifications are due back today. We'll review them with the OPM, make a recommendation on the submittals, and then hopefully be able to engage one of the firms that has submitted or does submit by the due date, for them to begin the work process to, like I said, this will locate where they're going to be. We'll do the preliminary site work and sketch plan outline of the building footprint. The modular builder really does more of the design when it comes to what we're actually going to be building once we put that out to bid. The plan right now is to spend the time between now and probably January or February with locating them, getting the site design, getting the preliminary outline of the box done, with an intent to put this out to bid in, I think, late February or March, so that when bids come back, we would have a solid number if we decide to go to town meeting with it this year, to take to town meeting, so that we wouldn't end up in a scenario where we allocate and ask for a number and we bid it after town meeting and we're 10, 20, 30% short, which unfortunately right now, as we all know, has happened to at least one project, which we had to take back to town meeting last year. So Vertex's work, we've put as I said, we've engaged Vertex Engineering as the OPM. They've done work for the town on various other projects, so we're very familiar with them, and we feel very strongly that they'll be a good OPM. And the request for qualifications for a design firm are due back today at 2 o'clock, in which case we will undertake the review and hopefully be able to award, with the goal of bringing this to the 2022 annual town meeting so that we can move forward, hopefully with an award after the town meeting and a debt exclusion vote to begin construction.
Just a tiny bit more about that as well. Our plan would be that, so for the housing itself, it would probably primarily house lifeguards and DPW seasonal staff. There may be some other seasonal staff. We want to look into the management of this facility. Hopefully we would either engage a manager by some kind of a management contract, and or possibly we could have somebody live there who manages the place, you know, people wise, not maintenance wise. I'm talking about people wise, and make sure, you know, things are, what's the word? Behaved. We've also talked a bit about, could there be a couple of units that are used for consultants or people the town engages, contractors maybe, that could use housing in the off season instead of coming over here every day? Could they be there, pay rent, and which, you know, that would be charged to us anyway, probably, but maybe it would help lower the cost a little bit of a project if that were to be the case. Students like WPI students, they come here annually and do a variety of projects, town being one of them. Maybe they would be there, but that kind of planning has not been completed yet. Also, we have some seasonal housing scattered about right now. We have it at 39 Washington Street, which is next to the finance building. We have some down further on Washington Street Extension. And we have a house on Orkawa that houses the bulk of, well, maybe the bulk of the lifeguards, a number of lifeguards. I think that is it for, and the Loran Barracks, which would continue on as is. So the idea here is to house all of those other seasonal staff people in this location. And then the locations that we've been using could be repurposed for something else. So 39 could potentially be removed and that area incorporated into the parking lot. The property further down on Washington Street could potentially remain for storage, but not much else because sea level rise and climate change will impact that at some point. And Orkawa could be removed, and we've talked a bit about some kind of a mini subdivision, or not even a subdivision, but some housing in there for department heads and or town employees that is vitally needed. So that property could be repurposed into additional housing for town employees, but year round.
Okay, thanks, Libby. That's helpful information. Thoughts, questions, comments at this point? Jason Bridges?
let me just wondering, through you, Mr. Chair, on the priorities, I know this is your priorities, you and Brian's, Libby, but the seasonal employee housing and then the senior employee housing, I would see those as being a high priority with our strategic plan, with everything that we've seen this year, with staffing. I don't know if that helps, thinking through it, but to me, it's high, even if there's another one that's above high, super high.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The priority listed there
Yeah.
on the sheet. Yeah, we probably should change that to high. Good point.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Other thoughts or questions? Okay, I mean, I just, to give this some shape in everyday terms, in today's dollars, doing some quick napkin math, this works out to about $140 a week for 40 staff members for the next 30 years, which seems pretty reasonable, considering I think people are spending about $250 to $300 a week for housing. Libby, the thing, just keying off your comment about perhaps putting people, having off-season facility for people who might come and visit. You mentioned WPI, I think Worcester Polytechnic. They actually, I just got a thing through our broker's feed that they're looking for a winter rental for a professor and his family. So I think that's a great idea. And I would just ask that if it's at all possible, perhaps in conjunction with the idea of someone being on site, there might be maybe 2 areas of the building that are set up more like a suite, so that there's, a separate bathroom and a separate entry. And that might give you a little bit more utility. But I think this is a great project personally. And when I say long overdue, I'm not putting that at anyone's feet. It's just how it's worked out. But the longer we wait as a community, the more this is going to cost us, and there's definitely need. I mean, our housing is really in a crisis situation. So that's my comments at the moment. Anyone else at this time on this one? Okay, Jill?
I think you said, but I didn't hear how many people is that for the summer?
Well, I used the range in the data we received in the proposal was 35 to 40, and I used the higher number, figuring we're going to probably need it plus more for a 30-year period. Okay.
Overall, it probably would house, I think you're probably right, Stephen, around 40 people, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. The Yacht Club, Brian or Tucker, do you guys remember what they have?
I think that, go ahead, Tucker.
The Yacht Club accommodates 32 people, the way it's configured, and it does have a couple of apartments, 3 apartments, I believe, the way that Stephen was just.
That's helpful information too. Thanks. Okay, if there's nothing else, we're going to move on to the new senior center.
Okay, the new senior center is going to need some refinement, but the basic concept here is that with the board's recent vote to proceed with planning for an Our Island home facility at the Sherburne Commons site, as well as repurposing the current Our Island home site into a senior center, the idea is that, well, actually, this isn't even for fiscal 23, it's for 24, but I'll just mention it anyway. The 3.6 million would be for architectural and OPM services, and it would also be for feasibility study as to whether or not that building could be renovated for this type of use, or whether it should be demolished and rebuilt. There are a lot of system issues with the current building, which of course has been plaguing us for several years now. And I am not really sure it's going to be worth the cost to renovate the existing building, but that is what this study will tell us.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, you guys, this is an out year, but I just thought we'd hit it on our way. Any thoughts at this point? Comments? Okay. Next up, we've got the PFAS.
Okay, PFAS, I think Greg, you're taking that one.
Yep, I'll jump in on that one. This has been my and Chuck Larson's life for the past 18 months plus. To give you a little bit of background, in October 2019, the airport was notified that an MCP, a municipal contingency plan order, would be coming down from the state for the airport to look for test source levels of source release areas for AFFF, which is the firefighting foam, and provide for mitigation. And so that order did come down in December of 2019. Hearing that, the town decided voluntarily to start looking at potential sources of PFAS around municipal properties around the island. So we're not under any order, any requirement to do anything. Of course, drinking water has its own standards, and Mark and the water company have been managing those for quite a few years, and everything is perfect with them. So in July of 2020, we engaged in our first contract with CDM Smith, a very well-known firm out of Massachusetts that has a great reputation regarding their technical expertise regarding toxins such as PFAS and so forth. And I'll expand on that. They started an assessment in July of 2020 for $43,000. And because we're a town and we're so broad in our scope, that assessment quickly grew to another $43,000 to look at the wastewater treatment plant, landfill, potential release sites elsewhere on public property throughout the island. And so right now we've finished our phase 1 assessment, which was presented to the board in November of 2020 to give an idea of what they were finding as far as potential PFAS on property, public property around the island. And the board authorized a phase 2, which was to expand upon that and develop a testing protocol. So CDM Smith is now currently in the phase 2. That contract is roughly $407,000. To date, we've allocated, or at least appropriated, encumbered, I should say, $633,000 for PFAS-related efforts, just town side, not airport or water company. And we intend to have our phase 2A results hopefully by the end of November of this year, so that we can engage in some sort of testing plan. PFAS is not going away, and there is potential for the town to have a lot of need for corrective action. We just don't know what that is yet. In fact, this Friday, we have another large meeting with DEP. DEP, Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, is the agency for us that will oversee a lot of the regulations of what we need to do. We are a little ahead of DEP. We're testing or looking at areas that they don't necessarily have testing protocols or regulations or flow charts or whatever you want to call them for. So we're working with them to find out how we can best manage should we find PFAS here, there, or elsewhere. And we've had a great relationship with them. This will, I think, probably be about our 5th meeting with DEP over the past 18 months. And that's pretty good involvement. And we hope to have a really good, at least outreach plan for our landfill in the next several weeks. So we're asking for $2 million for FY23 because it's so hard to say this. We don't know exactly what we're going to need, but we know we're going to need something. And that's all I can offer. I'm sorry. But it's, like I said, we appropriated $750,000 this past year, this current year, past town meeting, and we're already $633,000 into it. We know that we're going to be expending quite a few to do the right thing. This also does not include funding for the town's intent to expand water service west of the airport. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell. I'm sure I confused a lot of people.
I think you hit it on the head there, Greg. Any questions or comments for Greg at this time? Greg, just I think 1 or 2 from me. One is, I know this is early in the process, so and we all, as you said, you don't really know, we the town can't know what our costs are going to be for this. But I'm wondering if we can just, I'd like you all to consider rewording to some extent, so that to the extent this is approved at town meeting, we're not locked into simply testing. This may also go for remediation or some other aspect of the PFAS project. Relatively simple. And then the other thing I just wanted to clarify or get some clarification on is, we did speak with Mark at the water companies about this in pretty great depth. He had pointed out that the Massachusetts level with respect to parts per million is considerably more
Billion.
lower,
Trillions,
so more restrictive, trillions, than the federal standard and the standards in many states. So I'm just wondering, you're interacting with your municipal counterparts and perhaps state level people. Is there any, I'm not a scientist, I don't know what the difference is, but if ours is so dramatically different, our states is so dramatically different than most states and the federal government, is there any chance that the state is going to be relaxing that a little bit to where is that? Any ideas?
Actually, I do have a little bit of background on that, and it's just the opposite. What we're hearing is they may even get stricter. So what we're hearing, the state legislature taking up discussions regarding, there's like 9,000 different types of PFAS, like forever chemicals out there. Currently for drinking, there's drinking water, groundwater. There's only, we call it the PFAS 6, the 6 largest ones that are actually tested. So there's no protocol, regulation, or threshold for thousands of others. And everything we're looking at right now, the levels we're looking at, it's all based around drinking water. There is no protocol right now for testing in a solid or a biosolid, a residual. And that is what's coming up. And so we're hearing that it might be even worse. I mean, it's great that Michigan really seems to be ahead of the game with a lot of this. So we hear constantly that they're looking at a lot of what Michigan is doing. But then every time we come up with something new, they'll say, well, Vermont might be doing something there, or Maine has that, or we're looking over here in California, because there's not one cohesive effort in Massachusetts right now that's saying, boom, this is what we're doing wherever you find PFAS. So I think it's going to get actually stricter. And you bring up a very good point, Stephen, about the wording of the article. Brian even brought that up yesterday, that we should make it so that we can be reactionary to whatever we may need. It may be a pilot test at the wastewater treatment plant, so we'll have the funds to be able to do that. It might be testing or remediation, and so it's not just locked into one area, one avenue.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful information. All right, any other thoughts, comments this time? All right, so we're going to move on to affordable housing initiative.
Great, thank you. Tucker and Brian are going to take this one.
Tucker, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
Go ahead if you'd like, Brian.
Okay. So we've put this into capital again this year. As you remember last year, as we went through the budget process, we allocated some operating money to Affordable Housing Trust in the amount of $375,000 in the operating budget via Article 8. And then we put a $1,625,000 article in Article 10, which was also accompanied by a borrowing article for $6 million in Article 10. This is what I think is going to be an annual allocation. The 1.6 million is going to be in capital. It'll be used to serve, and Tucker will provide you some more clarity to the members of the committee, but it'll be used to serve their non-operational missions that they have. And we are putting it in capital, even though some of it may not fit the strictest definition of capital, because the capital article allows us the flexibility, if it's not spent in the year, to continue to be able to utilize it after the end of the fiscal year with a capital article. So that was my recommendation to not only the Affordable Housing Trust, but to town administration. So I will let Tucker speak to what some of the projects that may be used or what accomplished, what the money will be directed to for the committee.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, committee. Yeah, so principally these monies would go toward projects such as Housing Nantucket doing a house move, or Habitat for Humanity constructing a home. As well, it would go to support our closing cost assistance program. As Brian pointed out, sometimes the timing of these types of things doesn't neatly fit within a particular calendar year. So we're greatly appreciative of the idea that it fall under capital and allow a little more flexibility around the time it actually gets spent. One other use probably important to mention is that, as you all know, construction costs have increased dramatically. The 6 Fairgrounds Tacoma Green project recently received a number of state, including workforce housing, et cetera. Even with all of that support totaling $16 million or more, because of the delay of the lawsuit, there likely is going to be a gap in the financing and some monies toward filling that hole should we be able to reach mutually agreeable terms with the developer, potentially could come from a source like this. I also just wanted to clarify, if it wasn't already, we are not seeking an additional 6.5 million this year as was approved last year. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker. Questions or comments? Jill?
Hey, Tucker. You kind of fuzzed out on me there. Can you explain what's going on with Hawkeen again now? Because I mean, they have such a big amount of money. It doesn't seem like this money would really help them so much. So I'm just a little confused. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm breaking up at all here. So Hawkeen was recently granted a number of different state subsidy awards, which were always part of the financial plan for this project. But because of the delays imposed by the lawsuit and construction costs now being what they are, there is going to be a gap in the financing, which they likely will come to the town and say, are you willing to play a role here? They have not asked for anything specific yet, so I can't tell you the extent of the ask. We obviously would have a number of conditions that we would want to include if we were going to be loaning money towards this purpose. And the 6.5 million that was approved last year, this type of filling the gap use was contemplated as a possibility for that authorization. It may be that $1 million that's needed. Therefore, the monies that we're talking about here can fill that final gap, if you will. I hope that makes sense.
I guess I'm confused because it sounds like you're saying that money was already approved with the money last year. So I'm just trying to get it to relate to this money for next year.
Yeah. So
you're breaking up. I know there's nothing you can do about it. Oh wait, stop here. We can hear you. No, just teasing.
Sorry, you do keep breaking up, Tucker. Sorry.
I'd like to just jump in here, maybe, Tucker, when we get you back to a clearer spot. So I think I'm hearing a few different things, and maybe Brian, you could clarify. There's, for lack of a better term, or just to be, there's 3 buckets. There's the 6.5 million bucket that was asked for last year. That's not being brought up again this year. There's the request in front of us now, which is a little bit more money, and we're talking about using it on an annualized basis, consistent with the description in the request, which is kind of a broad affordable housing mandate or mission and set of goals that relate to capital. And then there's the Hawkeen potential loan. And where I'm not quite clear is whether this money could be used, or you're asking that it would be available to be used for the Hawkeen loan, or is it specifically just for the other projects, not including the Hawkeen, if they come forth with that?
I'm kind of asking for maximum flexibility, but I'm giving you an example. The principal examples that would be used for is supporting the type of work that Housing Nantucket and Habitat for Humanity are doing, but it may end up, a portion of it may end up being used for that Halkine purpose if required.
Okay, thank you. For just on that follow-up, and then Jill, if you wanted to, I think it would be helpful for us to know if you're thinking that you would kind of partition off a certain amount of this for non-Halkine expense uses, that would be, just brought forth at some point. It doesn't have to be formally, but I think that would be useful information. Jill, did your question get answered, or are you?
Well, I guess the only reason since you mentioned Halkine, the reason I bring it up is it seems like, this is money to be voted on later, and don't they need money now? So wouldn't you use money that you already have? And does this mean that they're not going to be getting a permit anytime soon?
Well, to follow up on what Tucker said to the committee, I think that if they need money now, we have authorizations to borrow that are available immediately.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I feel like there's already approved money.
So I think that, and I don't want to speak for the Affordable Housing Trust, but I don't know necessarily that the money in this article would actually be available if they needed it, because we have the money, the borrowing authorizations from last year. We have the $1,625,000 from last year that would be able to support that. I think that this, again, Tucker can correct me if I'm wrong in this, I think this would be more likely directed towards the other efforts, being Housing Nantucket and house moves, or Habitat for Humanity, or things that they've typically supported there. Does that answer your question, Jill?
Yeah, I was just wondering on Halkine, are they going to get a permit this year or not?
So I would agree with everything that Brian just said. The thing we don't know yet is the gap amount. So depending on what that is, and then whether or not they would accept the terms under which we said we're going to need to do this. There are a lot of moving parts right now.
Okay, that's fair enough. I just wanted to make sure, like, I know every year we keep hoping that they're going to pull a permit. So, and I know you got well funded this year. So,
yeah, they would like to pull the permit as soon as possible. They would like to get going. Obviously, the road is going in. They're working with their construction folks to, sharpen the pencil on the increased costs, and are there ways that they can, approach things still from a quality standpoint, but, bring it in as close as possible to the existing finances that they have available. And, they're going to come back at some point relatively soon, with the number. But depending on what that number is, the different buckets of money that we have available to us, or may have available to us going forward, may end up needing to contribute toward moving this forward if we decide that lending this money is the priority. And when I say we, that involves the select board and, numerous folks.
okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Tucker and Jill. So we've got the new vehicle for Parks and Rec Manager. I guess just before we get into that, is it likely that actually be a request this year? Do we still think? Just, I'm cognizant of the time, and it's 11 now, so.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Any questions on the vehicle? Great. We're going to move on to the senior employee housing study.
Okay, the senior employee housing study. This is again a bit of a refinement, more in the out years. But as with the seasonal dorms, we are painfully not realizing all of a sudden, have come to be realizing, and it's been growing. We really need to figure out some senior employee housing for our upper level department heads. We are going to be experiencing some retirements over the next 3 to 5 years. Whether or not those would be filled internally remains to be seen. But if they're not, we are going to need to house people. So we look at the water company situation, they built a house pretty easily for their director. And our thinking is, why can't we do that? So what we would seek in fiscal 23 is, again, kind of feasibility study. Where could we do it? How could it be set up? Who could it be for? What should it be? Single family, duplex, how many bedrooms? I don't think we're talking about something the size of the water company house, but maybe a couple of different houses. This could help us start taking a look at the Orkawa site. What could be there? So as many other employers have been facing this, we are also facing it. And as the largest employer in the town, it's, we're behind here. So that's what it's about. Greg, Tucker, or Brian, do you guys want to add anything? Did I forget anything?
No, you didn't forget anything at all.
No, not at all.
Okay. I see Richard has his hand up. Richard, is this back to the truck, the vehicle, or is this on this particular one?
No, it's on this particular one. I can't seem to find a Rory for this.
It's new. We came up with it yesterday.
It's there, Richard. I just filled it out.
Yeah.
Not yesterday, but recently.
Is it admin 20-004? Because at the search box in my open Rory's, I put in town and it comes right up, Richard.
That looks to be the seasonal employee housing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll find it somehow.
Oh, this is the senior.
It's 23004. But just give me 1/2 second here, because this is brand new from yesterday, so it's possible that we didn't.
Rick, will you go ahead and just push that out to us? I thought that I saw it, but my access might be a little different.
Sorry, Richard. Yeah, I don't see it either, Stephen.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and push that forward. So on the information that's been presented, I think let's go ahead and proceed if we have particular questions or comments. Anyone? No? Okay. Libby, I think the only thing I would add is yes on employees versus employee, just in terms of for that amount of money, trying to get as much, which I'm sure is what your focus is, and the focus of the project, but just to underscore as much bang as we can get for our buck on the planning side of it, because housing, more to the point, is not going to get any better. And if we can take something off the shelf in a couple of years and dust it off and update it a little bit, we'll be better off.
Yep.
Okay, great. Next up.
Okay, next up is, Greg, yes, to your question. Island-wide underground wiring feasibility. So this has been kind of floating around a couple of years in, and it hasn't made it to an article. And it has some level of support from the select board. I'm not sure that it has a very strong unanimous support, but it is something to at least keep moving along and discussing. And what this would do is review, again, as it says, island-wide underground wiring. What would it take to put wires underground island-wide, and how would we prioritize? There are a lot of areas that, underground, that people don't realize what is underground. And you'd really have to proceed in a measured manner and determine, there needs to be a lot of coordination between electric company, telephone company, potentially the cable company. There may be some municipal issues. It may run into other utilities like water, sewer, or stormwater. So this would help get at what would it take to develop a plan and or implement a plan to put wires underground, and where, and how would it, best be gotten at.
Okay, thanks. And just for everyone's, Jill, this is actually this request was brought up in the past. Any questions or comments for Libby at this point on this one? Okay, I mean, we do note that it's indicated as a low priority. All right, well, look, we appreciate your time putting this stuff together. Membership will look forward to the senior housing study coming forth. And we are going to go ahead and move on to our next item on our agenda, which is the Rory review. and see if anyone has any questions on these requests in filling out their RORIs. Rick, is it possible maybe just to pull one up? It doesn't necessarily need to be a particular project, but as opposed to just doing this in kind of more or less intangibly without something in front of us, if you could just pull up a RORI sheet. Libby, you're free to go.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Good to see you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Tucker. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Give me 1 second, Stephen. Sorry, I'm struggling with this. Don't have it up in front of me.
I think I've got one if you want.
Want me to share my screen and do it? Mine's up. If you
release.
Oh my goodness.
happy to do mine if you want.
Yeah, go for it. We'll pull one up.
Sure. Which one you want? Any?
You can even use an existing one if you. I guess the affordable housing is as good as any other.
I just filled this out. I try to fill them out if I can while we're doing them.
Yeah, I think that's great form. Thank you. Very helpful. So someone's going to be going around the island to sneak attack you guys to come up from behind and say, get your Rorys in. So save me the hassle. All right, so this isn't on this particular request, but it's just with respect to the request that came forth. We did discuss in the past season that if anyone had a particular request they wanted to review Rory elements of, we would go through that process. And if someone has a particular request, we've got this specimen up. Jason, would you mind scrolling down just a little bit more to get, yeah, there you go, to get the rest of the table in. Are there any particular requests that anyone wants to get group discussion? So just to be clear, the purpose of this is if there's a request that town admin has presented that an individual member has information they think would be beneficial to the group, or an individual member has a question they feel would be helpful to get answered so they can do their Rory and or would be helpful for the group. For example, the wire study, underground wire feasibility study, was a low priority, and it's third one down there. Yeah, I see you, Jill. There we go. Okay, Jill.
Okay, well, I keep going back to the thing about the Rory, as it's like you're putting in it. If it's already listed as a priority, isn't that influencing our Rory? I mean, I would disagree about the feasibility stuff myself, because I think putting the wires underground is very helpful and did a long-term plan that ultimately will save us money, but you know.
Sure. No, and I hear this all the time. That's a great question, but it actually is a great question. Because the Rory is each of our individual members' ability to put a subjective perspective on these requests. We, because the department head has indicated it's a low priority, and I'm not using necessarily only the underground wiring study as an example, because I don't think anyone should get pigeonholed on that. You can put 100 in there, or you could put 100 in the ops high, the medium, and the low. And then, as we discussed previously, when we get to the group review, there will be perhaps one or two people who've done similar, or one person who's done similar. The point being is it will show up differently in the rankings versus other members, and it will be an opportunity to discuss it as a group. So this is an individual input, your perspective on the different line items, in order to, systematically within a framework, kind of give them a ranking of relative importance that we will later review and discuss. Just as of the time you input the rank, it's not the last say. We actually, we will have as much discussion as membership wants and kind of elaborate and debate at that point. What the purpose of this is in part is it gives us an opportunity to get to that point, having gotten through all the requests in a manageable way, and then having a kind of a scorecard, a report card that we've individually created, and then we have a team view, and then we can kind of review backwards. And then that will inform our final recommendation to the select board and that the FinCom reviews. So on this one, you don't have to put low. That's the short answer. You can put 100 in for high. And I just remind the membership, if you put 1 in, if you put anything greater than 1 in for high priority, the system is not currently set up to autofill the medium and the low. But of course, if it's a high priority, it's also a medium and a low. So go ahead and infill. If you put anything greater than 0 in high, manually input 100 in medium and low. And in addition, we could use medium as the example. If you put anything greater than a 0, then the low should also go to 100. And then that will also be the same type of an approach down in cost. And Jason, I want to thank you for following through with the mouse on these. If you put anything greater than a 0 in under a major improvement of efficiency and effectiveness, go ahead and manually input the 100 on the minor improvement. So if we got nothing else out of this, that's going to save me a lot of time later in the process. Thank you very much.
Chair, can I make a suggestion?
Yes, please, Jason, and then Christy kick them.
You know, there was 2 years where we, like Christy and I, we really debated this, you know, and that of what does this mean and how do we approach it? And so I'd be happy whether if you want to do it, Mr. Chair, with Jill, or Jill, if you wanted to do a couple of these, and I wouldn't influence or anything, but just when you do them together, you kind of see it's just helpful, I think, to do some.
No, I agree. Stephen gave me a lot of time Friday and it was helpful.
Okay.
But then today we faced this
Okay.
one. I think it's a high priority. And then I'm like, anyway, you know, I haven't filled them out because I'm struggling with, like, why not put 100 down for everything? I mean, that's, you know, it all sounds really good, guys. It does. And that's why I'm kind of like, and girls, sorry, Terry, I know you're on too, but I just want to make sure I'm not just putting in 100% because everybody likes it. You know, everybody's an advocate for their program. And everyone's pretty persuasive, to be quite honest.
Mm-hmm. And Christy Kickham, I'm going to let you go next. I just
Yeah, no problem.
Well, it's topical. So yeah, and Jill, that's exactly what this period is for. I mean, as a new member, you're going to have different questions about Lori than other members may have, or comments. And I think it's very helpful to have these. The other part of it is, I just want to be clear, is that one of the things Jill and I talked about, and I think it's worth kind of getting into very, very briefly, is, you know, we're looking at what these costs are, the cost of the project individually relative to its own request. At the review period, when we do the ranking of relative importance of a request relative to the others, is when we can get into ranking and maybe perhaps even changing them, not necessarily in the RORI, but in terms of our recommendation at looking at a project. So let me put it this way. As an example, the underground wiring, perhaps they came out at the highest possible score, but then we found that, I want to use the absurd for the purpose of the example, every other request was a legal requirement. At the time that we sat down as a group, when we did the request as an individual, we're ranking the individual request relative to each of the line items from our own personal opinion. And our, you know, opinion as a community member. When we get to the group point that we're doing it as the finals, all of them together, then we would be ranking them based upon what information is available. And in that instance, in that example, despite the fact that the underground wiring got 100 on everything, because it wasn't a legal requirement and everything else was, it probably wouldn't be recommended. It would be, you know, there would be a notation in the recommendation report that indicated, well, we would have liked to recommend this, but because everything else is legally required and we don't think we have enough money, we're not going to recommend this one for this year. It's for an out year. Other questions or thoughts on, oh, Christy Kickham, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna, well, just a few things. I was gonna say, there's probably a few times that I've scored maybe a medium score, maybe 50, and maybe the low priority like 75. Like I didn't just automatically default to 100. And what you were referring to in the high, medium, low priority. So when I am judging these, I'm taking them each very seriously and individually. This season, Rick, I haven't been able to get in. I have been doing my Rorys on paper. I just need to transfer it over when I get in. Rick, I'm able to get into my account, but it's all the old Rorys from like last year. So I'm not sure if there's a different platform that is not allowing me in, but I can look at my Rorys from last year. I just can't see the one from this year.
Okay, I'll have a look
Okay.
after the meeting, and I'll shoot you an email.
Okay, thanks, Rick.
Okay, and then you guys might be able to Zoom. Christy, with the greatest respect, you were outvoted on that. And the reason I mentioned that is let's use the major and minor efficiency as the example.
Yep.
If it's a major efficiency, clearly it's a minor efficiency improvement. One supersedes the other. It's not that we're ranking them individually. It's that there's a supersession in there. I think I might have invented a word there. And you go ahead and you rank it out. And the reason I mention it, and I'm kind of not drawing a hard line, but it's so that we're doing them consistently amongst one another. We're entering data consistently amongst one another for the individual requests. With respect to the other example would be high, medium, and low. High, medium, and low is that it's required in order to prevent degradation of service, for instance, versus low is that it's elective. So again, it's superseded. If it's a high, if there's any valuation of high, it's certainly 100% low. So I'm happy to discuss and debate and work something out if we change them. But I would ask that everyone be consistent, and at least for the time being, if you input greater than 0 on a high, the medium and the lows are 100. Christy?
Just to that, if we are all consistent to a certain parameter, then what do our individual scores really say? They should be, shouldn't they be very individually motivated to come to a means to an end? Because if we're following the same parameter, then we're kind of basically saying, well, we all think this is the same score, let's just plug it in.
Well, yes and no. I mean, we're looking at a framework and process at this point. I think what you're referring to is subjective valuation. What I'm saying is, this is like if you put high test gas in your car, 96% octane, you've also got the 86 and the 84, which are the medium and the low. You're talking about whether you put gas in your car or diesel, or whether you're talking about a different aspect of the inputs, where what I'm referring to is addressing the framework and the process consistently. You're welcome to put in as many points you want. If you think it's low, that's what you're encouraged to do. That's part of the process. If you think it's medium, again, we're not suggesting there's a standard, a minimum, or a maximum other than 100. While we might want to put 150% down for medium, the process in the framework is you only put 100. So these are numerical values within the framework as opposed to subjective criteria ranking. And we can talk about it more offline. I'm happy to.
That's fine. Yep.
But I want to be cognizant of the time.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments on Rory? Okay. Let's see.
I'm gonna fill mine out. I promise. I'm gonna do it.
Okay. And
Not
Jason's comment about involving someone else in the process is fine too. If you want to reach out to someone, me, Jason, anyone else, feel free to. And the only thing I would say is, just for the purposes of open meeting, although it's probably not a requirement, is just indicate that if you are at a following meeting that you reviewed the Rory's together with respect to process, and then that way there's never any question later on.
That's
okay. All right, so next on the agenda is green sheet committee reports. Jill, did you have a FinCom meeting?
We did. I can't really think of any, Rick, I think, wasn't on the meeting. Brian was, Brian went over the budget. And they're gonna go over that next week in the select board, so everybody can see that. So it was just a preliminary budget. The numbers were, of course, just the high level numbers. There weren't a lot of specifics like we're talking about here. I can't think of anything else that really came out of that meeting. We only have a couple more meetings until, we won't really start until the new year, and pretty much it's just updates on the budget. So.
Gotcha.
But our meeting is joint with select board on Wednesday, and that will be a good meeting for people to watch to see the new budget.
Okay. And then we have, I think, good to the order, we're proceeding okay, except for there might be a hiccup on the Rory's, which I can help out with, Christy. The select board is going to receive a high-level preliminary intro on the FY23 capital requests and an update on the capital improvement plan document. So that's the 10-year plus a more robust view into that, with perhaps some narrative and backup in detail on processing goals and whatnot that Rick has been working on, Rick, Brian, and town management. That is, did I say, is that on the 23rd, Rick?
So I mean, so on the 22nd, which is the meeting that Jill's referring to, Select Board has a meeting to which Finance Committee and Capital Committee have been invited. So it's not a joint meeting per se, but both committees are invited. I'm going to send out after the meeting what looks like your normal meeting agenda, and it'll have the YouTube webinar link that you can register to join the call in case you wish to participate. I'm posting it as a meeting in case we end up being quorum. So if 4 people show up from this committee, then it's technically a meeting. And so we needed to have the meeting posted. Finance Committee is doing it identically. What will happen is the same review that Jill, you got at Finance Committee earlier this week, as well as the preliminary outlook on FY23 capital. Both will be presented to the select board. Stephen, when I wrote you the email and I said the 10-year SIP, I only meant the out years. So they're not getting a preview of anything, some written document that, composes both the narrative and the financial data of our 10-year SIP, right? That's not what they're getting. They're getting essentially what you've been looking at in a PowerPoint.
No, that's helpful. I had not had a chance to follow up because I would have thought that we'd get that would be a document that we're working through as a committee and with you all in finance. And I anticipated that that maybe it wasn't, that I may have misunderstood, but thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it. Christy Kickham.
Just a comment for Jill and maybe a reminder for Steve that there was a point to where at some point you can actually, if we pull up a certain item or capital request, you can actually see everyone else's score. And I think Jason was partly referring to the fact that we could see what everyone voted on a certain item or how they scored it. And it created some good discussion on how people thought about certain items. It possibly was reserved for those items that were kind of split in the community, in the committee rather. So that's kind of a nice discussion point when you can see everyone else's scores and see how yours line up. Just a comment.
No, that's great, Christy. I appreciate it. And that's something we'll hit. Jill and I did touch base on there. If you all look in the left-hand margin, when you have your particular request up, you can click on, I think it's Team Rory or Capital Program Committee Rory, whatever the title is. And that will pull up that individual ranking and then the average for each of the line items. And then what we'll do, just for clarity, is when we do the overall up-down for the select board, for town manager, the select board, and then passed on to the FinCom, that is, we've got all of our individual Rorys in, there's a team average, we rank them, we look at the standard, the deviation, we determine at what threshold we want to start to pull out and review requests that are close to one another with respect to whether or not we're going to recommend them, and any of the others that anyone wants to speak to. And as part of that process, we will pull up on the screen the team averages. And then, as you just said, Christy, that gives us an opportunity to see where someone else may have had, for instance, Jill had 1,000 for underground wiring, and we get a chance to talk about it and understand why, and it could inform or influence our opinion. So good point, and I think it's good to keep us all reminded of how we do things. Institutional memory is important, especially getting new membership on. Other thoughts or comments? Okay, great. So date of next meeting is Thursday, September 23rd. That's the 23rd meeting at 10 a.m. And with that, I would like entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Excellent. Richard, on your motion.
Aye.
Jill
Aye.
and Christy
Aye.
and myself and I. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rick. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks, you
Take care,
guys.
everybody.
Bye.